football player Kylian Mbappe has refused to get involved in some commercial activity. But why? Hello, I'm Dominic Walker. Welcome to JMW's Inside Man YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and keep the conversation going in the comments section as well. Stephen Taylor Heath is my guest. Stephen is head of sports law here at JMW Solicitors. So, Stephen, why has Kylian Mbappe refused to get involved in some commercial activity?
Well, Kylian Mbappe is obviously a member of the French Football Federation team, and the French Federation have entered into central sponsorship agreements with sponsors of the national team. And he is saying that he and his other players want to have a greater say in who those sponsors are and what they have to do for those sponsors. And he's not out on a limb here. Apparently, the coaching staff and the players are supporting him in relation to that. And on the basis of that, the French Football Federation said they will be negotiating with him. Just to peel it back a little bit, all professional footballers have image rights companies now, which hold their image and their commercial rights. So when a player contracts with his home club, that playing contract is split into two. There's the playing element, which is with the player personally, and there's the commercial rights, which with the image rights company. So a player has personal sponsors, he has sponsors of the team that he plays for, and he has the national team. And a basic rule of thumb is that if 3 or more players are featured in an advertisement, then the player is being featured on behalf of the team that he represents rather than in a personal capacity. So the French Football Federation would say that if they show 3 or more players in an advert, then effectively Mbappe is there on behalf of the French Football Federation rather than a personal capacity. But he is saying that where those sponsors are sponsors that he himself would not personally wish to endorse, he doesn't want to be pictured on behalf of the French football team. Part of that is because he says that the proceeds from his share of the commercial sponsorship proceeds are given to charitable causes, and there's a conflict there if those monies actually come from companies such as betting companies that he doesn't agree with the morals of.
And it's really helpful when you strip it back like that, Stephen. Can players then refuse to endorse commercial sponsors? I mean, I'm thinking about during the Euros, famously Cristiano Ronaldo removed some soft drinks bottles, didn't he, at a press conference?
Yeah, and by doing so, he probably had a counterintuitive approach because he probably drew more attention to the sponsor by doing that than if he just ignored it. But having said that, yes, there is another element to this, that effectively a player would not expect his image and reputation to be brought into disrepute by the activity of the club that he is playing for or the team that he is playing for. So if he wants to really go to that degree, he could say that if the sponsor adversely affects his reputation, then he may wish to take a stand on it. The basic rule would be no, though. A player who contracts with his club or with his national team gives up certain rights in return for the privilege of playing for that team, or obviously being paid by that team. And so because they pay the wages, he ought to provide reasonable cooperation with regard to the club or the national team sponsors. Having said that, obviously you have these superstars where the same rules don't really apply, and they have a greater degree of bargaining power. So if you have an Mbappe or a Ronaldo or someone like that who negotiate their own deals and have a greater say in the affairs of the club and the national team, then they may have a greater degree of flexibility than the average player would have.
And according to media reports, the French Football Federation are going to do some sort of renegotiation of agreements here. What's that likely to include, Stephen?
Well, the French Football Federation are really just being pragmatic here, because they know that if you have a sponsor of a national team, whilst, as I say, you could in theory just have any 3 players in the national team featuring an advertisement for that sponsor wants to have the best players in that advert. And if they are told you can't have the best players, then that has an adverse effect on their ability to commercialize their sponsorship. So the sponsor wants the French Football Federation to ensure that the players participate. And because Mbappe seems to have used his leverage to require them to come to the negotiating table, then you are likely to have some form of committee that has discussions in relation to who the sponsors are. And in any commercial sponsorship agreement, you have a suite of rights that sets out what the players will have to do for that particular sponsor. It may well be that the players have a say in what that suite of rights are going to look like, so that they can't turn around and say, we're not prepared to do this, because they were part of the negotiating process at that stage.
And I know you do a lot of work around image rights and sponsorship agreements as well. So how can you help with these sorts of agreements?
Well, as I say, the normal playing contract that a player has is a pretty standard contract. It's on the FA website, for example. But where you have any player who has sponsorship rights, they split the rights between the image rights company and the playing rights. We can set up the image rights company and we can enter into those types of contracts and secure the rights that the players need so that it's done properly. We can also ensure where the particular player enters into sponsorship agreements themselves, that will be with the image rights company, and we can deal with those types of agreements. And then finally, when it comes to negotiating with the clubs, because we have that level of sophistication, we know what needs to be included at the stage when you're negotiating, so that a year down the line, when the club requires you to do something, you can't then turn around and say, well, I didn't agree to that in the first place, because you should have considered that at the time you entered into the playing contract.
Stephen, thank you very much for your insight. If you'd like to contact Stephen and the sports law team here at JMW Solicitors, you can email insideman@jmw.co.uk or call 0161 82 81 999. Please also subscribe to the JMW Inside Man YouTube channel for the latest legal news, hints and tips.